Hello. Hi. I'm going to take a deep breath, and if you want to do that with me, you can. I just get a little butterflies when I have to talk into a mic. So, my name is Rebecca. I also go by RJ, and I'm the founder and executive director of Telling Queer History. So, thank you all for being here. You are part of this queer history. You are part of this community, and I'm so grateful that you're here. We have some great storytellers. I hope you had a chance to start looking at the exhibit, and please feel free to get up and take care of yourselves whenever and however you need to today. There's food and beverages back here tell me stage left, stage right, I don't know these things. Towards the door you probably came in, there is food back there. And then away from that door, there are bathrooms over that side. And you can use those at any time. Yeah. And I want to go over just a couple community agreements that we like to bring into the spaces telling queer history. I'm going to sit down now. My adrenaline is shaking me up. Woo! Who likes talking in the mic? I do. Ooh. All right. So one of the things that we would like to practice is just respecting each other's identities and understanding that we might make mistakes, but we're all going to try to do our best, and know that the person who tells you their name or their pronoun knows themselves better than you do. And so just practice it, We're all going to practice. So that's one. We're also going to practice confidentiality. You're going to get to hear some wonderful stories from our panelists, and then hopefully from each other. So what I like to do is you get to take what you learn from these stories out of this space, how you feel about them, but don't take the details without consent. You can take the details of this exhibit. There's lots of great information there. Go tell everybody to come. You've got until October 8th to see more of this. But yeah, so confidentiality. Taking care of yourself, we already talked about that. What's our other one? And then this might apply as we get to share space and stories together, is step up and step back. So think about, is your voice often heard in spaces in the world, out in the world? If it is, maybe this is a chance for you to practice the gift of listening. Listening is an incredible thing that you can give to others. If your voice isn't heard very often out in the world, and I know most of us are going to be in the LGBTQ community, so our voices aren't often heard, but this is a really great chance to speak up, okay? So those are our agreements, and we can practice that together. If there's anything else you need, there's some folks in the room who can support you. There's Kimmy from the Minnesota Historical Society. Hey, hey. Thanks, Kimmy. And one of the designers, Noah, do you want to wave, is here. If you have more history questions, ask Noah. I'm not a historian. I'm a curator and a connector and an activist and an artist. Noah is a historian. Noah has dates in their brain. All right, so that's some layout for us. Now I'm going to drink bubble water. How gay is that? All right. Let me look at my notes. I made up a job for myself 10 years ago. I didn't really know. This is not in my notes. I'm going off script. I don't even have a script. 10 years ago, I started telling queer history. I was working on the marriage amendment. Did anybody participate in the marriage amendment in Minnesota? A few of us. Only a few. That's amazing. It really took hundreds of thousands of people to make that change. And for me, it was one of the first times I ever got politically active. And so what I saw in that campaign shaped what telling queer history became. What I saw was 12 states before us, homophobes went state by state, which is a technique that both sides of the political spectrum use, going state by state to change the Constitution through voter amendments. And they were trying to define marriage as one man and one woman. And they were trying to do that in Minnesota as they had passed it in 12 other states. Well, in Minnesota, we tried a different technique in the campaign. And that technique was, instead of trying to argue for our rights, because that didn't seem to move many people in the middle, we called one person at a time. Each volunteer would call, and if they answer, they say, "This is what marriage and love means to me. What does it mean to you?" And we used storytelling and empathy to change just enough people in the middle to vote against this homophobic constitutional amendment. And that was amazing. And I saw that, and I wanted to see more of that. And I also saw how much my queer and trans and friends of color were not going to benefit, or were being harmed even by this. All these billions of dollars and tons of people's energy was being poured into something where still they wouldn't get a job, they wouldn't get safe housing, they weren't going to be safe walking down the streets, right? And so I wanted to make more spaces where we could talk across our class, race, generation, all the ways that our beautiful community is diverse, right? We, as queer people, are lumped together, but we're all kinds of people, and that's something I love about us. And so telling queer history is born from that desire to build more bridges and connection, and using storytelling to root us in our belonging and to build those relationships. So that's the first story. So anyway, I started that 10 years ago, and I didn't know I was going to do so much public speaking. I'm a camera person, so I prefer that side, but here I am doing it anyway. So thank you for your encouragement as I try to do it every day. So what we're going to do today is we're going to hear from 3 storytellers from their own personal experience. And then I'm going to walk you through a little bit of connecting with each other. I've got some written down, and we'll also say them into the mic, some stories, prompts, and hopefully you'll meet somebody. And the idea is that we get to build more community today. So just prepare your introvert self to maybe get out of your comfort zone tonight if you're ready for that, okay? And if you're not, you're welcome to leave. We said you can take care of yourself, right? Okay, last little announcement before we get to Pam, our first storyteller. You might have gotten flyers, thank you. Our first hosted, curated storytelling event for Telling Queer History is coming up on October 14th. We just announced it, tickets are now live, and they're sliding scale. We're going to talk about, it's called The Substance of Queer Joy. We're going to talk about how drug and alcohol have shaped the culture of queer culture. That came out weird, but yeah, we're going to have some great storytelling and thinking about how do we want to shape our culture and spaces and social connection, and how have we done it in the past. It'll be ASL interpreted, all ages, substance-free, childcare provided. There will be food and non-alcoholic beverages, and it'll be downtown, public library, Saturday the 14th in the morning. There will be coffee. All right. Hope you can join us there too. That's enough from me. Are you ready to hear about Pam? All right, Pam Colby, I have your bio, here you go. Has worked in television and film for over 30 years with a passion for telling queer stories. Pam's most recent narrative short, Perennial, 2022, premiered at the Rose Filmding, Amsterdam Film, that was probably a word I said wrong, festival in the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Film Festival. Pam's film, Not in My Lifetime, great one, is a feature-length documentary that won the Audience Choice Award for Best Minnesota-Made Documentary Feature at the 2018 Minneapolis-St. Paul International Film Festival. Pam's love of storytelling led her to the Moth Storytelling Competition, where her Grand Slam winning story was featured on National Public Radio. All right, you have a mic?
I do have a mic.
Take it away, Pam.
Thank you. So I'm talking about a woman's coffee house, which in 1976, a group of white women got together and had a benefit for the Lesbian Resource Center. A lot of the work of the Lesbian Resource Center to begin with was around when women would come out as lesbians, they would lose their children. Because if the male, the husband, went to a judge, they would automatically get full custody. So a lot of the fundraising to begin with was around that issue. After a really successful benefit, which this is history that I've only been able to gather, I was not there, but after that successful event, they did form the Women's Coffee House, which had a Y in the name Women. So around 1983, I was in Iowa City, Iowa, and I went to the Women's Center there, and there was something called the Lesbian Connection. And it was this mimeographed newsletter about what was happening across the country. And one of the things they talked about was a woman's coffee house in Minneapolis. And I was trying to decide where to go live. And I actually had relatives here too that I could stay with. So I moved up here, and the first thing I did was go to Amazon Bookstore, which was on Hennepin Avenue. They had a bulletin board, and if you don't know, the big new corporate Amazon had to pay a little Amazon Bookstore to get the trademark for that. So there's some good queer history. So anyway, on this bulletin board was a flyer for a women's coffee house. And I went down to find it. It was on 19th and Nicollet in the Plymouth Congregational Church. And finding the door was the biggest trick. I had to circle the church about 3 times. It was in the fall, so it was dark earlier. And finally, I watched women going in that back door and followed them in. As you came into it, the first thing that you experienced was smoke. It was a smoking lounge as you came in, and it was incredibly, like you couldn't even see. It was so smoky. It cost $1 to get in, and then as you came in further, there was large speakers, a turntable, and women playing albums and dancing. So not too long after that, I joined what was called the Collective. And for the coffee house existed the first probably from 76 to around 80, 82. It was very white. It was very separatist. It was sober. There was no alcohol. It was a place where political arguing was constant. There was a lot of, if somebody said something, then you were speaking for the whole community and you had to agree. So it was especially as a collective member. But there was the other side of it, was just one of the things that I would say was the most known about the coffee house was that women often did not wear their clothes while they were dancing. And that was just super common, a lot of nude women dancing, especially their tops. And one time, one of the women pulled the fire alarm, and I ran over and pulled it back up, but it was too late. And it was not, the alarm wasn't going off in the building, so nobody knew. And I went out and looked, and sure enough, there was a fire truck coming. And all these firefighters with axes and big, firefighter outfit. And I said, could you just give me a minute? Because there really isn't a fire. And they were like, no, we have to go check out that room. So anyway, all of a sudden the door flew open and all you could see was naked women. And they were all just like, ah! But none of them were upset about the firefighters. They were just like, it was just kind of funny. And it was a very bizarre moment. So there was a lot of just dykes with guitars. We all called ourselves dykes at that time. And art shows. You could have your art on the walls. Around the early 80s, the white women were really aware that we were racists, and it was wanting to open it up. The collective that I was on, Deb Parks and Terry, whose last name I can't remember, but there were 2 African American women on the collective, and they called us out on a lot of things, which I'm sure true. The other thing the coffee house was known for was transphobia. There was a vote that said that anybody who wanted to ask a trans woman to leave could. And I would, in retrospect, definitely call it transphobia, but also I think that a lot of the people at the coffee house were transgender or genderqueer in some way, so it might have been some internalized transphobia too. But anyway, that started to change towards, okay, so one thing I want to say is that the lesbian and the gay male communities were super divided. We had separate gay prides in like 77 and 78. And so I think the AIDS crisis really changed the coffee house because the women were starting to really reach out and become part, the community came together around that. And I think most gay men will say they were amazed at how the lesbians stepped up during the AIDS crisis. So that changed the coffee house. There was some, Karen Clark came out of the coffee house. She would never have gotten elected without that energy. So I would say that the final days of the coffee house, it closed in '88. That was, I think '87 was that giant national march on Washington. That was a lot about AIDS, because I had gone and done video there. So the final days of the coffee house, it was changing. It was opening up. There was a lot of acknowledging, but I think that it was an important era for just women. If you look at this, there's not a lot of evidence of where the lesbian community was. And and I think the women's bars were in St. Paul because they were cheaper there. It was cheaper to run bars there. But anyway, it was a really important time in terms of generating identity and figuring out moving forward, and I am really happy that I was able to be a witness to that history. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Do you mind if I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
I know some of these answers because I've been doing this for a while, but I'm kind of thinking maybe some of the audience doesn't know who is Karen Clark and why does that matter, and why was there a Y in women, and what's the significance of the word dyke, things like that. And how did you make family when you lost your children to custody battles? Those are my questions.
Well, Karen Clark was represented out of the Phillips neighborhood in Minneapolis, and she was one of the first lesbians ever elected to office. She wasn't the first, but she was the longest serving and she was in the House of Representatives. Dyke, I think that comes from Bull Dyke. Bull Dykey. Okay, that all that old history. But does anybody remember Bull Dyke? And then there's another rendition after that. Bull Dagger, but there's I think it comes from some ancient word actually. So that's as far as I can go with that. I actually am. I'm in a middle school right now, and I'm the what do they call me? The advisor or something for Gender Sexuality Alliance, and these kids are amazing. But I said, we used to say dyke, and they're like, that's kind of a bad word these days. So anyway, these are young kids. But anyway, very interesting to see how they identify at such an early age. So Karen Clark Dyke and...
Why the Y in women?
Oh, the Y in women. I think it was just saying that we weren't women. We were queer women. A lot of lesbians use the Y in women, and I think it was just a way to differentiate.
And then you mentioned fundraising for custody battles. Can you talk a little bit about that, like the significance of custody battles and building family when we didn't have access, and what that meant for a woman coming out and having access to her children?
Well, I mean, there's nothing more terrifying than losing your children. So, and I know this happened to men too who came out. So the fear was if they knew you were queer, they could take your children away from you. And this had happened, or women didn't get the custody they deserved because it was clear that they were the better parent and had been doing the parenting. So what I remember is women with their children at the coffee house, and there would be opening another big issue, which was boys. And if any of you are familiar with the history of the Michigan Women's Music Festival or the East Coast festivals, West Coast festivals, there has been traditionally a big debate about boys, and then many of us went on to have boys. That sure changed my outlook on it, having two boys. But anyway, I digress. I don't really know. A little bit. I was not. Things were really getting I always felt like somebody was kicking down doors, and I was able to walk through them, because what those people went through, what the queers went through in the 70s, that was the real work. And then the 60s, everything before that. But the 80s, I think. The whole slogan of the, silence equals death. That was a big deal, that we had to come out because people were dying, and so I do think the early '80s just really was a game changer in the queer community.
If you have a question in the audience, we can take one, or we can wait until the end. I'm just trying to track our time. Anybody? Okay, I see you and I hear you. Should we pass the mic? Okay.
Hi, I just wondered, how do you feel about the manifestation of the Co-op and bookstore in its later years in the late 90s?
Manifestation of
the Amazon bookstore and Co-op in the late 90s and
what the Amazon bookstore became in the late 90s, and
how do you feel about
and when it was on Chicago? I really would not fairly be able to answer that because I wasn't tracking that as much. I knew it was some rendition of the old Amazon, but had sort of lost the. I think the original Amazon was a co-op, for one thing, and that became an independent owner bookstore. Was it still a co-op? Oh, see, that's why I shouldn't have answered. I don't know.
Was it you that do you want to ask?
Yeah, just quickly, you used the term separatist, and I know there's a lot of different meanings of that, particularly connected with women's movement at the time. I just wanted to know what you meant when you said that the group was separatist, because it also has it's very tinted now, and I wanted to know if you had a definition for what you meant when you said the group was separatist.
Well, first I want to say I've never identified as a separatist. I remember trying to rent a room in town and meeting with a couple of lesbians, and they told me they were separatists and that I wouldn't be able to have my dad or my brother or anybody come in, and so I was not going for that. But yes, separatism was a big deal. It was very much practiced. It was as much as possible having separate space from, and then it was defining women as women-born women, and that there was just space for women-born women. That's how I would say separatists defined what they... No, yeah, it was not. It was the way it was used was lesbian separatists.
Well, let's give Pam another round of hands. A little pause. Hopefully you have some new stories and thoughts and questions and some things you can research when you get home. Or on your phones if you're really good at listening and looking at things. I am not. All right. I'm going to introduce our next storyteller, Anna. Anna Meyer is a holistic healer, practitioner, and consultant, a community organizer and artist who has been working in local and national LGBTQ and BIPOC communities for over 25 years. Anna works for healing justice through supportive, restorative connections with others, each other, and our natural world, and the system we all live within. Anna is the founder of Formation Healing Arts, works with Rare Productions, is the board of director, co-chair of the Minnesota Healing Justice Network, and a board member of Twin Cities Spectrum. Anna was a longtime District 202er, which you will hear about what that is if you haven't known, and the co-founder of the beloved Cafe Southside in South Minneapolis, whoop whoop. Anna is a light-skinned, mixed race, white, Mexican, and Native, non-binary, disabled queer who lives, loves, and works on Dakota land in South Minneapolis and beyond. FormationHealingArts.com is Anna's website. Thank you, Anna. Go for it.
Hi. Can you hear me? Yeah. Wonderful. I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about, what stories I wanted to bring. And in Rebecca's email, you talked about like downtown connection. And so for me, that actually goes back to my birth. Because I was born on the banks of the Mississippi River, right at the University of Minnesota, before it was the University of Minnesota Hospital. It was called St. Mary's, the small building I was born in on campus. It's still there today. Now it's used as admin, I think. But in terms of my connection to, and this is something I've been thinking of a lot lately, of place and to land, the Mississippi River is a grounding place for me, and always has been. And I think that does go back to my birth. And then I ended up going to the U, for my college years. And at one point, it was actually really nice because me and my sister and my mom and my dad all took classes one semester at the University of Minnesota. And so it was a different experience for me to be able to actually learn. Me and my dad took a class together and got to learn next to each other. And again, by the Mississippi River. So I think that that's my first, whenever I think about downtown, I think about I think about the Mississippi. I also go back as a young person and think how grateful I am that I had parents who were artists, because I got to come downtown to take dance lessons. I got to come downtown to McPhail, before McPhail was right here, in its old location, closer to Loring Park. And so I remember going to, cello lessons at McPhail and dance classes down on Hennepin, and just watching downtown change over time, and how much some places are still the same and some places are so much different. And then at 18, when I was in college, I started to really think about my sexuality. And at the time, I came out as bisexual first. And I remember my mom, and this was probably 1995 maybe. And I remember my mom having such an issue with me being bisexual, because I would have no community then. The straight community wouldn't accept me, the lesbian community wouldn't accept me, and I would have no community. And as time has gone on, my sexuality and my gender has changed for sure. I went to identifying as a dyke after that, and then have stood pretty firm in my identity as a queer person since the mid-90s, since late 90s. And it was when I was 19 years old that I met my first long-term girlfriend, and she brought me to District 202, which at the time was on 24th and Nicollet. It was, good old 1996 here in the city of Minneapolis. And I remember walking in, and if anybody ever went to that original district space, it was a hole in the wall. There were mice, rats, other things. And it was so beloved. We loved that space. It was home. It was a place where you could come and just actually be. It was a place that you could actually come and get involved. It was a place that you could come and just play pool. It was a place that you could come and really become a community activist. It was a lot of things for so many different people. And the founding executive director was Michael Kaplan, who actually just happened to be in town this past weekend, which was great, because he's still around, and I've seen him over the last few decades. He's lived out in DC, so I've seen him on and off over the years, but he was the one that really gave me actual opportunity to not just organize within District 202, but actually get connected with a national community of LGBTQ folks, especially mixed race and BIPOC LGBTQ folks. And so I think that was a huge turning point for my life. Like, I look back and I have no idea who I would be without District 202 being such a part of my life. The connections that I formed there are still existent today. With all of the layers of, I always say that Twin Cities queer community, especially queer trans BIPOC community, but whole queer community, I'm just gonna go, is extremely complicated, delicate, and resilient. And so watching those changes in relationship over almost 30 years, I just turned 47 last weekend. And thank you. I'm happy that I'm still here. And it has been a choice in my life more than once to still be here. And I think that there is actually community. There was a community. There was connection for me to actually find a reason to still be here, despite all of the shit of the world. And so at 19, even before that, I was an organizer. I did a lot of environmental organizing, and I also did a lot of working with adults youth experiencing homelessness before then. But after, and in college, I was a women's studies major. You know,
Can you say what District 202 is?
yeah, so District 202 opened up in 1991 and closed in 2009, the physical space. And I was there from 96 to about 2002. And it was a community center by and for queer youth, period. That's what it was. And it was supposed to have youth leadership, which it did in many iterations throughout the years. And I remember being devastated when I heard that adults were going to close District 202, because now all queer youth could just connect online, and that's all they needed. And I remember how formative. So I just said I turned 47 this past weekend. And 2 weeks before that, I just went to the celebration of life for somebody that I went to 202 with and had known since 1996. And in that room were people who had been in community in a variety of different ways for almost 30 years. And that was the most powerful thing for me, is to keep on showing up in places where I have those long-term relationships. That doesn't mean that we always get along. Let me be clear. Actually, the person who passed away, his name was Cinto Burkhofer, and he was one of the few people in my life I spent time actually hating, because he had very much hurt people I was very close with and could be an asshole, self-admittedly. But we all still showed up. We were all still there because we all still have people in common, and because we change, and because all of us are assholes at one point or another in our lives, whether we like to admit it or not. And we hope that people will see us through to the other side when we do change. You know, in those long-term relationships, especially being mixed race, especially being non-binary, I used to present as a stud, as a little butch, and my gender presentation has varied over the years. My gender identity never has. I've always known that I was non-binary. You know, and I think that for District 202 was right on the edge of downtown Minneapolis. After 97, we moved to 16th and Nicollet. So then, also I grew up at Zev, Cafe Zev, if anybody remembers Cafe Zev or Cafe Weird. Cafe Zev used to be right behind the SA on 15th and LaSalle. It's now a salon, Jungle Red Salon, I think, is what it's called now. And there's a huge high-rise next to it that wasn't there before. You could still smoke. You would walk in, and it was literally like, let me just find the counter so I can order. And they sold these, you know, long-term Zevers will tell you they sold these mochas, iced mochas. And they were the best iced mochas in the entire world. And they weren't made with expensive things. And so I asked a friend of mine, because I, you know, knew multiple people and dated multiple people who worked at Cafe Zev. And I asked the other day, what did you guys put in those? Because I swear you like used Folgers coffee from the SA next door sometimes, right? Like, it was a queer coffee shop. It was gay owned, white gay male who owned the coffee shop. His name was Dan. I have no idea where he is in community, or if he's still around in community or not. He would always have some little young boyfriend, because it was that kind of thing. And so, but he wouldn't always go shopping. So sometimes, and so what she told me was that it was interesting. She was like, we did use espresso, but it was like the cheapest, whatever he could get, espresso. And then we used Hershey's chocolate and half. And I was like, oh, now I know. And they were literally like, I don't know, 30 ounces. And we would just sit there and chain smoke and drink mochas and like be baby queers. It was, we would do karaoke or open mics. We would, you know, it was one of our home bases to be at. District 202, after it would close on dance nights, we would go over to the 90s. Late 90s would go to the 90s, starting like 97, and you could get in even if when you were 18. This might still be the same, actually. I think you can get in after bar stop serve time when you're 18, even if you're not 21. So we would go work dance nights, close up really quick, go over to the drag show to catch the end of the drag show at the 90s, and be there from like 1 to 3 in the morning. And it was a different kind of feel. There was still always straight people at the 90s, but it was definitely more white, gay, male heavy. And it wasn't always a great place to be as a young dyke. There would be comments. There would be, especially if you were passing for possibly a young boy, my ex-girlfriend would get hit on all the time, or her ass grabbed because they thought that she was like young boy. And so just so many different places that we would go and relate to, and I still have a relationship with that strip of Nicollet Avenue. Like it's part of my home base. Plymouth Congregational, knew so many people who went to AA meetings there. Knew so many people who went to, I worked with youth experiencing homelessness, as what we said at the time, now unhoused youth. And we would send youth over there all the time. District 202 was the first place I ever, worked so intentionally with unhoused youth. Because I would say about at least half of the young people who came there were couch hopping or unstably housed or unhoused. And so it was when I started working with youth. I was a youth at 19. By the time I was 30, I was an elder in community. Now me and my partner, who, I'm just under 50, they're over 50, seem like we're like, I don't know, the grandparents or something like that in community now. But I think of why is that? Because that's not very old. But it is about actually staying present in community. It's about continuing to show up, because a lot of people will drop out of organizing as they age or shift focus or do this or do that. And so sometimes you didn't actually see those people around anymore. And so having role models, as I grew up, having and seeing the national queer scene, I got to get involved with the National Youth Advocacy Coalition, which was based in Washington, D.C., and it did advocacy on behalf of queer youth nationwide. And I got such a connection there to, the executive director of NIAC was Ray Carey. Ray Carey's now the director of the task force. And so I've known Ray for almost, which is the what is their new name? They're the LGBT task force now, National Task Force.
And now it's Kiara Ray.
Oh yeah, now it's Kiara, that's right. And yeah, and so Ray Carey was there right now. I know that Andy Garcia is still there as the conference director, and he was at NIAC when I was in the late 90s. And so many of us who were during that time, especially the late 90s, and Kamar will also touch on this too, I'm sure, but we're still connected. Even if we don't see each other on a regular basis, or we might catch each other here or there, but some of us are still, my ex-girlfriend is still one of my best friends, my very first long-term ex-girlfriend. And my partner performed the wedding ceremony for her and her wife. They're family to me. And so even though I am very blessed to have a number of my family, biological family, still in my life, the bigger blessing is that I still have a huge chosen family that's still in my life, that has been for almost 30 years. So I'm very thankful for that. Yeah.
Thank you. That was a really powerful closing. I really appreciate the naming the messiness and the beauty of finding our people amongst that. Yeah, you really wrapped it up beautifully. I love that. I don't have any specific questions for you. I'm curious a little, I mean, you kind of talked about this, but like, what did being a part of something that was youth, by youth, for youth, how did that shape you as an organizer and a healer and the artist that you are now?
It empowered me to find my own creativity, number one, and my own passion, and to discover where I did fit, right? Because I think that for a lot of queer folks, we don't know where we fit, especially when we haven't kind of figured out what our sexual orientation or our gender identity. I think a lot of non-binary, a lot of mixed race folks. So finding a place where I could feel like it didn't matter. You know, the most common question I've been asked in my life is, what are you? What are you? What are you? And there, even if somebody did ask me, well, okay, some people still ask me like that, but but there was also a deeper question of what are you? What's in your being? Who are you? Way deeper than just what's your racial makeup, because I can't quite figure out what you are, you know. And so, I think that district. I think back in 1997, you know, I was a women's studies and an art major in American Indian Studies minor at the U, and I did a calendar that some of you may remember. It was by donation sold as a fundraiser, and it was a 1998 District 202 calendar, and it was all black and white film. All the photos I actually developed and printed, like in a black and white film lab, because that's what I did. And then found a printer to give us way reduced costs. And all those pictures, when I look at them now, I just see the intense community love. There's so many young people, and were my peers. I was just taking pictures of my peers and my friends. And the magic that's in those, not just because of me, but because of also the time. I mean, I'm a good photographer, but, you know, but there's also something about that space and that time that really, I think, came through in a lot of those, and also transferred into that long-term community. I think it's also one of the reasons, you know, opened up Cafe Southside in 2011, me and my partner Rox. You know, because physical space is still needed. Virtual space is not enough. Our people are still dying. And so I think that's, and the struggle with space. Spaces come, and then because we don't own our buildings, they go. And that, I think, is the biggest challenge, especially for queer, trans, BIPOC communities, is owning space. Owning the building. Now, when you got a mortgage, you still don't really own it, but at least you have more access to stay in it. You have more of a right to stay in it. And so I think that looking at, for me, that's what it's left me with, is that early organizing, is that there is nothing that has changed. I don't care what internet comes around or AI, you know, I mean, we didn't even have dial-up in 96. So I had a pager in 95, 96, 97. You know, and so I think but that's the thing that sticks with me, is that we have to have places to find each other and just happen upon each other. That's, you know, Cafe Southside was one of those places, especially combined with Rare Productions and the Minnesota Trans Health Coalition, where you could just go in and you would probably see somebody you knew. And if you didn't, you might meet someone new, you know, and have a conversation. We had people who would drive hours just to come to the cafe, to have coffee for an hour. We had people where that was the only place they ever went on a date, because them and their partner were gender non-conforming and they never felt comfortable going anywhere else. And we weren't fancy, y'all. I mean, you know, we tried, but, you know, and we closed at 7. So you had to be, you know, intentional about an early date. So, you know, but I just think of all of those moments of community. You know, the other, you know, the Power to the People stage is another annual place. Nick Metcalf and Roxanne Anderson started that stage at Twin Cities Pride. If any of you have ever been to Twin Cities Pride, the Power to the People stage, P2P stage, was not a stage that was started by Twin Cities Pride. It was a stage that started as a protest and hosted BIPOC, queer, and trans artists. And so that's still the same today, even though there's more Pride support, Twin Cities Pride support of the official stage, officially, and there's sound support. But we literally used to haul in, and I've been involved, it's been over 20 years now for the Power to the People stage. And I've been there for 16 probably. And we used to haul in the stage, like literally everything, including, I think the first stage, at least one of the years I was there, was like literally a 4x4 square, and Chastity Brown could like fit up there just with her like guitar and her. None of the drag queens performed on the stage. They all just went around it. Only if you were a solo artist who didn't move a lot could you actually perform on the stage, And so I think of those places, and it's still a place where people do come. We're on the corner of 15th and Willow, and we're there intentionally. People are like, oh, why are you on the corner, not in the middle of the park? Well, because we want to be able to run away.
Yeah.
Like, that may seem funny, but we've been surrounded as a stage by Pride Security, by Minneapolis Police. And so having a place where folks can come, still access community, and still dip out when you need to dip out is huge. For me, that's harm reduction, community harm reduction. How can we stay involved? It is. Yep, one of the few accessible stages, yep. And so I think that really, some things haven't changed. I was thinking about your stories and knowing people in my life personally who, when they did divorce their husbands, their sexuality was a huge issue in custody, right? And I even still know somebody who's going through that today, and it's their gender too, because they're butch. And so like they literally had been femming themselves up and putting heels and eyeliner and all these things that are like, this is not me. And this was just this year, not in Minnesota, but just this year in a US place. So many things haven't changed, and so there's lots of work to do, and we still need community physical spaces, and that's where I'll end. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I also, telling queer history started in Cafe Southside. I met Scott Artley at a Quorum networking, and then we met up for coffee at Cafe Southside, and that's where he was like, okay, we got Madame upstairs, which was the very punk, disgusting space that we had at the first event, whereas like half the wall is knocked down, it smells like pee. I said the words combined, pee and beer smell together. It was gross, but we had it. We made it happen. It was very queer. So just shout out for all the serendipity of finding and meeting people. There is something magical about that. So thank you for holding that space for so many years.
Yeah, just on that note, so Madame was next door to Cafe Southside.
Yeah.
So next door there was childcare. It was always questionable what was downstairs in that building. And then upstairs was a queer artist collective. And what interest and was one of the challenges, and I'm going to just point this out here, we couldn't do anything at 3405 in Cafe Southside building. Madame, as white queers, could get away with anything. They would have parties till 4 or 5 in the morning. We tried to throw a children's birthday party upstairs and had to hire a fire marshal.
Yeah.
And so the attention that's paid to BIPOC queer businesses and the regulations is way different than what's actually for white queer organizations. And the policing is a lot more hardcore. And that was one of our issues. We couldn't actually make the money that we needed to make because there were so many regulations that would be put on us that weren't actually being put on other spaces. So.
Yeah, thanks. That's real, and thank you for naming that. Yeah. Kamar is a Black, Indigenous, transgender, queer person raised in the Indigenous medicine tradition and Islam. In childhood, Kamar sat at the feet of his Iroquois, did I say it right? Iroquois. Iroquois grandmother on his Creole mom's lap, listening to the wisdom of elders and absorbing the ancient tradition of storytelling. And you're so good at it. Formerly a certified mediator and narrative therapist, Kamar was committed to helping at-risk queer youth find safe harbor and access to mental health care through the LGBTQIA host home program, Avenues for Homeless Youth, Reclaim, and several other partner organizations. All right, take it away.
Thank you. I'm going to start by thanking each and every one of you for coming out here tonight. You know, it's been rainy today, and it's difficult for some of us to get out here, you know. I've got MS, primary progressive MS, and probably going to have surgery coming up here pretty soon, coming spring. And I'm really grateful for the ramps and the accessibility here and all that business, because my spine is detached. Oh, I loved listening to everyone's history. You know, I came into St. Paul and Minneapolis as an outsider. I was born in Southern California in the Woodland Hills in 1980. And my mother and her siblings, actually, we don't have solid birth records for them because of the Indian Relocation Act of 1958. And my entire family and all of the Robeson County and Lumbee Indians were moved off of their lands, and many of them forced into rural areas in Southern California. So me and my cousins grew up in LA County. And that was a trip. You know, I knew I was Two-Spirit. My grandma told me that she knew I was. And we tried to tell my mom, and that was a horror show. So, long story short, I moved up to Minnesota in 1998 to reconnect with my mother. She, like myself, was born designated female at birth. And when she was born, she was evidence of a crime in this country. They said she was miscegenated. Yeah? And that was a legal term for people who were born ethnically diverse and mixed. It was criminally punishable in the vast majority of southern states and in many northern and western states. And a lot of people didn't know about this unless they were mixed, right, and suffering from it. So my grandmother was able to sell some of her land, and the rest was taken from her. And the reservation where she was raised no longer exists. And my mom was a part of the Alcatraz movement. She was a part of the revolutionary movement. She married my father in '79. His mom is Mayan, from the Quiche people who had to flee persecution in Venezuela. There was a terrible coup going on in Guatemala and Venezuela back then. And so she moved up to Canada, and that's where she met my father's father. You're gonna have a little funny humor with me. I hope you can deal. I hope you like it. You know, I'm not your typical cat. I didn't find out I was autistic until last year, so that explains some things, but you know, it is what it is. And so yeah, I was raised in this amazing environment because my dad's dad is North African, you know, an Egyptian. His folks are from Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. And he moved over here as an immigrant into Canada and encountered the indigenous community and fell in love with my dad's mom. And my mom was a wild child, you know. She did everything she could for her community, and when she felt like she wasn't getting anywhere, she had an amazing habit of just cutting and running, you know. And she was up in Canada because there were way more rights for indigenous and mixed people in Canada in the 70s and 80s. And it's still true today. Things aren't glorious, you know, but it's far less of a struggle because people have actually moved towards reconciliation because they've acknowledged the history. They're not in a place of denial governmentally, and you'll see that also in New Zealand, you know. They're not in a place of denial governmentally, so you see a lot of beautiful things happening in those communities, and I have optimism for ours as well. So By the time I graduated from high school, I'd been in situations where I had to defend myself and my cousins from neo-Nazis and skinheads because, the joys of Southern California in the 80s. Everybody thought it was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed place for a reason, child. They didn't want y'all seeing us. And I came up here, and I started working full-time because my mom had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and she'd had to cut back and then cease her hours at the Children's Hospital, where she'd previously worked as a CPN. And man, long story short, I'm not going to go into everything. We ended up getting evicted. Times were hard. She was able to get shelter at a women's shelter. And I was a young, furry-faced trans kid. And I couldn't get a shelter. There was no shelter for me. Not in all of St. Paul or Minneapolis in 1998. I would go to youth shelters, and there were a lot of huge cisgendered people right on the edge of the youth qualification who made it very clear to me that my safety and physical sovereignty and well-being were extremely at risk if I dared cross the threshold. So I did not. I just went back to my roots. I was very familiar with Woodlands, and Theodore Wirth Park and the adjoining woodlands were not nearly as developed then as they are now. There was beautiful forest land. There was old growth woodland. You could walk from that woodland into Minnehaha Park. I did my first introduction to this land at Minnehaha Park in Minnehaha Falls. I came at night and I did the old ceremony under the moon. I won't say too much about it. I had my sage and red willow tobacco, the Kinnickinnick. And I felt a connection, and I felt a recognition here. And when I was working and homeless, I continued to search for housing. Being an outsider, I didn't know any place or anywhere to go. I knew one spot, though. My mom had introduced me to the drinking community of St. Paul. She was a self-identified butch dyke. She said she had gone through a phase, and that explained her 3 children. She had gone through a phase of bisexuality where she had hidden it predominantly from her husbands for her own safety. And after she had separated with my father, she came out. Our community had not reacted in a welcome way towards her. The indigenous community was awesome, but the Orthodox Islamic community that our father had been a part of was very violent. And so she left, and as soon as I graduated from high school at 17, I left. I didn't want to end up homeless in LA because my Uncle Shakir was kicking folks out. If you weren't fitting into his heteronormative umbrella, you were not safe on his property. So me and my mom got our queer asses up here to St. Paul and Minneapolis. And I don't know if you are all aware of how famous this place is in other states and cities. I was a little kid in middle school in Southern California reading a Time magazine, and for the first time at the dentist's office, I read a Pride edition. And the place that had the most women per capita who were out as queer and lesbian was St. Paul and Minneapolis, the Twin Cities. And I saw so many pictures of non-binary people. I saw so many pictures and photos of men and women and dykes kissing and embracing and being happy that in the back of my folder I wrote down, I am going to find my way to Minneapolis. And I crunched my numbers and graduated early and got a little scholarship and came up here with all intentions of beginning college immediately, but health concerns and family often come first, Near the reservation where my mother had been born, there was a nuclear waste, basically dump site from the US government. We hadn't had cancer in my family, ever. My great-grandma lived to be 101. Great-grandpa didn't die till he was 107. And then suddenly here's my mom, right, with breast cancer, and then all these health problems keep cropping up. You know, I've got MS and all this other stuff. And we didn't understand the concept of environmental racism at that time. Not me. I mean, I was 17 years old. I didn't know anything about it. I just knew what I'd experienced. So I hit the streets trying to figure out where to go, what to do. And what was the name of that lesbian bar in St. Paul? Say it. It was the Metro. It was the Metro. Ooh, it was the Metro. Yeah, it was absolutely magnificent. I'll tell you right now, I didn't get harassed. I didn't get, like, it was like, no, they treated me like I was Junior, you know, that's what they'd say. Here comes Junior, because they knew my mom, and her nickname was Red, you know, and although she identified as butch masculine, she always used female pronouns, still does, you know, and they said, here comes Junior, you know, what are you up to, Junior? And I was like, well, I'm done with work, and I'm hyper, and I don't have anywhere to go. And I just barely got by the guy, the new bouncer you guys hired. He's starting to card people, you know? So what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? And some young dyke there was like, you want a cigarette? And I'm not good at hints, you know, I'm autistic. I need a 2x4. And so she's like, you need a cigarette? I'm like, I don't smoke. Thank you, though. You know, and it continued on. And then, like, she tried again later. And she's like, would you like to step outside with me while I smoke? And I'm like, well, it's kind of chilly. And she's like, I'd like to chat with you about a spot where you can hang out. And I'm like, oh, cool, thank you. You know, saying that. So then we got up and went outside, and and she was talking about a few places. She mentioned Cafe Zev. She mentioned District 202. She mentioned Spirit of the Lakes Church, which used to exist on Lake Street and 14th, just about, South Minneapolis. Now there's Spirit on the Lakes Homes is there, and we were actually a part of raising the money for that place to exist, and I was really happy about that, just seeing some kind of continuation with that, because it was a beautiful place. That was a place where I walked by, and they had their doors wide open, and they had a huge table laid out. Now, I'm not Christian. I'm not Muslim either, you know. I turned out to be a lot like my grandma, and I hold her beliefs very closely to my heart, and I also engage in a lot of other indigenous practices and traditions. And I just was struck by the authentic generosity. There were no put-ons. There was nobody standing there like to put on a show. It was just a table laden with food. And I walked by, you know, and I did one of these. I said, well, I don't want to seem rude, you know, I don't know if they're expecting guests. And so I walked by, and I stood by a tree, and I watched, and nobody went in. And I was like, huh. I waited for a while, nobody went in. I'm like, huh. Well, the food's gonna get cold. You know, so I crept a little closer, and I peeked my head around the corner, and somebody in there saw me, and they were like, hey, and I'm like, oh, sorry. And I went to run, because I learned that pattern to save my hide, right? I ran surprisingly fast for a brick-built 5-footer, you know? And they're like, wait, come back. You're welcome. You're welcome to come in. And I was like, oh. That sound came out of me because I was like, oh, this is going to be a trap. What do they really want? You know, so I looked up at the sign, church. Oh, no. My grandma told me about these missionaries, even in the cities, huh? So, because, you know, half my life I spent out in the woods, you know, in Arkansas and in the bayou in New Orleans. We'd take summer trips to be with the family, and I heard all these stories. And here, oh, now this is why they have the door open. You're not going to get me, you know. And they're like, just have a seat, no pressure. I'm like, are you guys going to preach or something? It's going to be a sermon tonight? And I tried my best to keep all judgment out of my voice because I didn't want to be mean. I just wanted to keep myself safe, right? And they were like, no, it's just actually a fellowship day, and we do this every week. What? And now that was the second time a group of people told me about District 202. I was in there eating, and I had to use the bathroom. And it's always, oh no, now I have to use the bathroom. What's going to happen? I don't want to be assaulted, first and foremost. So how do I relieve my bladder safely? So, I watched from a distance. That was my teenage pattern. Who goes where? And I watched people going every which way. I was like, what is happening? No one had ever, there was so much vocabulary I didn't know, that I wasn't familiar with. The Islamic community had been very insular, And when we were with the indigenous community, it was at family gatherings, and we just talked about our stuff, and we saw in-laws and relatives and stuff, and so everything was new, and I didn't know what bathroom to use, and it was getting dangerous. And so I did a very stiff and controlled walk towards the area, and I looked to the left, and there was a sign that said bathroom, and I looked to the right, and there was a sign that said bathroom, and I stood there. I was like, all right, okay, I'm just gonna hope everything is gonna be all right. And I went to open the bathroom, and somebody came out who was just as beautifully androgynous as you please. And they stopped and looked at me. You can use any bathroom you want here, it's all good. And then they walked out, and I went in, and they didn't really tell me about District 202. They had stuck a flyer onto the little bulletin board in there. And I don't really know if it was supposed to be a bulletin board, but the back of the bathroom door had become a bulletin board. So I read it, and there wasn't a thing to pull off. So I was like, oh, sorry guys, and I just took the whole thing, put it in my pocket. And I finished up, and I went to my camp for the night because, I didn't know any safe squats or buildings, And when I started to meet people, I think because I came across as so gregarious and was so easygoing, when folks show me heart, my heart just opens up, and it's all good. And I think that a lot of people assumed that I was from Minnesota or that I knew about some locations I didn't know about. Years later, when I ended up working alongside someone who had worked at District 202 or volunteered there, Alex Jackson Nelson, was at some meeting and talking about Mary's Place. Do you guys know about Mary's Place in Mission and downtown Minneapolis? This old Catholic lady opened up this place called Mary's Place long time before my time. And she's this sweet ancient lady, and she's got cute feathery white hair, and she hugs the children as they come in, and she gives you shoes and all this stuff, all this marvelous stuff for homeless people. And I didn't know anything about it, because no one told me I was another homeless, indigenous, mixed youth, right? And I learned how to be in drag across many sections of society. I found a place in St. Paul after work one day that was a youth drop-in center around the corner from Black Dog Cafe. And I'm trying to remember the name of it. There was Face to Face, and there was someplace else. Safe Zone. Does anybody here remember Safe Zone? My goodness gracious. I was just a green little 17-year-old thing coming in on a bicycle that I literally saved from a dumpster, and I fixed up the chain to the best of my ability, and the brake didn't work, so I would just wear out the bottoms of my shoes, and I skidded right on in there, And that's where I found out about the host home program, all these things. And so the first time I went to District 202, I didn't go. I walked around it, and I scoped it out, because again, that was my pattern. I would scope out places 2 or 3 times sometimes before I went inside, which is why it was so spooky for me to actually go into the Spirit of the Lakes Church, besides it being a church. And the second time I went around the building 3 times. I was walking, and I walked around, and I looked, and I walked around, and I walked around, and I finally said, listen, if you go in there everybody that you see is also going to be queer, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, or some amalgamation of the sort, or an ally, okay? And they'll see you, and you will see them. So take a deep breath and go the fuck inside. And so I did, because I have a harder voice with myself than I do with other people. I'm sure y'all can relate. All these Homo sapiens here? Yes, okay, I see some of the heads nodding. And, so I finally went in there, and gosh, it was great. They were right on top of Village Video. There was a place called Nicolette Village Video that was right underneath District 202, and that was where we could actually get videos that Blockbuster would not rent you, videos about our community. Paris is Burning was at Village Video. You could get some local stuff from there too. There were zines you could pick up in the front of Village Video. And so I went upstairs, and it was a Saturday night, but it was before the dance night, so I didn't get frisked or anything. And I kept to the walls. I kept to the edge, and I did my circumambulation, just quietly and coolly checking out the space, and I couldn't believe what I saw. There was a coffee bar run by youth. There was a library. There was art on the walls, and it was nice art, and it was all made by youth. You came in, and there were 2 bathrooms right away that you could see. One said male, one said female, but then in the back there was another one that didn't really have a label on it. I don't think a lot of people know about that, but I find out everything. There was a DJ booth, and we were the ones who manned the DJ booth. I mean, not me yet, because I was just there the first time. And I got to just see all these things, a computer lab with internet hookup. And this is 1998, mind you. College campuses had just started to set up open computer labs for their students all across the state. And this place had a computer lab for the youth. There were staff who were volunteering, who were professional adults. Rox was there. Yes, teaching people about how to get involved in the community, letting us know about things that were happening that impacted us, introducing us to the concept of peer counseling. Letting us know that there were other organizations that were available for us to help. And there were therapists that worked and volunteered there from places like Reclaim that came into being later on, but who had come out of Face-to-Face, who had stopped services with the GLBT youth at that time. They had closed their GLBT youth groups. So all of these different youth organizations like Tyson, like the coffee shop y'all had open, like District 202, these were actually necessary. It was a safe place for me between visiting with my mom at her spot where I couldn't stay at, right? Visiting with other people, their places where I couldn't stay at, not knowing people well enough to feel safe enough to couch hop. You could stay at District 202 until after bar close, depending on what staff was there. If they knew you worked overnights, they had coffee for you. There were safe practices that you were taught about, and the items were available to you without everyone in the world knowing your business. It was the first place where I wasn't made fun of for being so furry. It had been such a problem for the medical community in the 80s in California that this two-spirited kid, designated female at birth, was diagnosed with hirsutism. They actually diagnosed me with an illness because I was fuzzy. Now, my ass hit District 202. They all said, Are you a drag king? You should do drag. I was like, no, this is real. Says that peach fuzz isn't spirit gum? No, it's not. And yeah, we were celebrating each other. I got introduced to people in the therapy community like Janet Bystrom, who was one of the people who let me know about the GLBT Host Home program. I mentioned that a lot of the elders in our community opened up their homes for homeless, trans, and queer youth. They didn't know us. I came from LA. I could have been anything. They could have let a Crip up in their house. Oh my God. Now I don't have any criminal record or history or gang affiliations. But we had to go through trainings, both for the youth before they went into the host home and for the prospective hosts. And District 202 would help us find space. Sometimes we would use Rox's Cafe as meeting space, because it was hard for us at first to get space for these kinds of things. We would meet in the basements of places before we were given space by other community members, you know? And it got to the point where when you went to District, before I even hit the parking lot, I'd have a smile. There were Jewish kids, white kids, Mexican kids, you know, there were black kids, there were trans kids, there were mixed kids, Asian kids, Hmong. We were all over the place, all of these beautiful punk rock white kids, gothic kids, you know, some of us skating on the edge of the leather community and we didn't even know what it was yet. All right? Banging on the door. They're talking about, you can't come in here till you're 21. We're like, ageism! Ageism! Starting our own little cliques and stuff. And then we turn 21 and we actually get in there and we're like, oh, no, we're so glad. Yeah, no, safety is good. You know, but the beautiful thing that our community had to do, the gay and queer community had to extend its definition of youth. Because so many of us ended up having delayed adolescence, delayed childhood. We had to take care of ailing parents. We had to take care of our younger siblings. We had to take care of other people in the neighborhood. You know, we had to watch out for each other so much. Things could be so rough, you know, especially if you were recognizable as a female-bodied person, especially if you were recognizable as a trans female person. In the 90s, when I came into Minneapolis, Minnesota, in St. Paul, there was a tragedy playing out on the streets of downtown Minneapolis that the MPD did not look squarely into the face of. There were missing and murdered Indigenous women and children, and Black and Latina, and all kinds of trans women going missing every single week. And we were marching, and they were beating us. My brother Qasim and I marched in 1998, downtown here. Whose streets? Our streets. And there were old, beautiful hippies with their lovely flowing hair and their short, nice hair. They had their cameras, they had their puppets, they had their signs, and they were marching down first, you know, and then we had the labor rights people, then we had the nurses who had been denied their contracts, and there were people from the unions who'd been denied their contracts who had queer kids, and we had been denied even the right to use the bathroom on our campuses, right? They had security coming in behind us. It was all over the news. Our UTIs were not what they were worried about. There were boogeymen that they were worried about who didn't exist. They thought we were going to do all kinds of things. We just wanted to pee and have some safety, right? But Minneapolis was so powerful because other people came to march with us. People who were straight. People who didn't know anything about the queer and trans community, but they heard about the suffering, and their hearts, they felt that cracking and opening occur. And there were people who, when we started to lose some funding and struggle, we started having parties to raise funds for the youth organizations, for the cafes. We were having barbecues. I was lending my grill to Rox. I remember she walked all the way from the cafe. Pardon me, using old shit. They walked all the way from the cafe to my house because my disabled ass, I wasn't able. But I said, I have it. And y'all can have it. Use it as long as you need to, because we had to rely on each other, you know? And that's how places like Reclaim even came into existence. We had house parties. The queer youth and the trans youth had house parties. We'd raise thousands of dollars at every frickin' party, you know? And we would just hurry it into somebody's hands. Hurry it to you, hurry it to Janet, hurry it to Alex, you know? We gotta try to save these spaces because we know we've got each other's backs. We know the volunteers that come in here have our backs. We know that all of the adults that come here, these are professionals who work with youth, who work in the community, who work in the political scene in the forefront, going to Capitol Hill on our behalf. And they organized us, and there began to be youth at the Capitol Day. And we dressed up, I'm telling you, we got each other's hair right, you know? We went down there and we had speeches. We had things to say to them because there were a lot of things they believed they had already accomplished. But then when you look down at this young gay man or this young trans woman or this young genderqueer kid, you know, or this non-binary person, they hadn't even considered all of us. You know, there were many things they didn't understand. Oh my God, I know time. I have no linear connection to it. You got to hit me over the head. You know, I actually forgot you gave me the sign before. I want to respect everyone's time. I know that you're here, and you've taken this time out of your schedules to be here. And I want to give you all time to ask any questions, make any comments. I just wanted to thank you so much for what you said about District 202. And I want to thank you for all the work you did, because before I showed up, it was people like you and so many other people here who made it possible. Mm-hmm. And you weren't alone when it broke your heart when you heard adults were closing it. I got off work one day, finished my college class, and I was working 3 jobs to go through that. And I was like, man, I need to stop off at District. And I didn't have any notice. Suddenly it was closed. Because I was on the outside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I want to thank you all for listening to me, listening to this outsider. You know, peace and love to you all. And now I'll stop.
Thank you. I'm gonna like shake some of that out too. Yeah. Like we got on a journey. I love how you tell stories.
I know as an Indigenous person, I don't give trigger warnings, man. I forget because isn't it all just
beautiful.
present?
It's great.
So forgive me.
Our history is messy and beautiful, and I love that you name the lineage and both your personal and your queer ancestors and all the space. The fact that we are in a public museum right here today is because of so many people doing the work and making space for us. And so, like, thank you for all those known and unknown ancestors. Yeah, I just got the tingles from just naming them. They're here. And I want to do like who wants to stay and meet some people? Or do you want to just like have some time to, raise your hand if you want to stay and have like a little organized talk. If you want to just like grab some snacks and do your own thing, you can. If you want to like have a little structured conversation time, we can go over here. I know the HVAC is really loud and this acoustics aren't great in this space, so we'll do our best. But I've got written prompts that I'll also read to you if you want them. So we'll go over towards the bathroom for like a structured conversation. Maybe we'll break out into smaller groups. And if you don't want to do that, you can just grab snacks, go home, look at the exhibit. And so thank you all for being here, for doing your part to holding the queer community together. You are loved and you belong here.